topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Hello and welcome to the Connected Table Live. We're your hosts, Melanie Young and David Ransom, your insatiably curious culinary couple. We love to bring you the amazing people that we meet around the world and what we eat, drink, and hope to explore and inspire with you as we travel. And today we're in a New York state of wine.
Yes, we are.
How about this backdrop, right? We're in New York's Finger Lakes, which is one of the most historical and significant wine regions of New York and the East Coast and the United States. For those of you who may not know, New York State ranks third in U.S. wine production after California and Washington. I think we have visited almost all of New York's key AVAs, and we were so lucky to spend, I think, 2 or 3 really amazing weeks up in the Finger Lakes after we sold our house, and visiting different wineries. And one of them, of course, we made a beeline to is the winery we're spotlighting today, which is one of the most historic and significant in the Finger Lakes and, frankly, the East Coast wine production. We're talking about Dr. Konstantin Frank. It's really significant for so many reasons. It was founded by an immigrant who from the Ukraine, Dr. Konstantin Frank, who came over and had a PhD in viticulture, and he was the first to successfully plant vinifera grapes here in New York State and on the East Coast, which you're going to talk about. There's been many other major milestones since the 1962 when the winery was founded, and Dr. Konstantin Frank is still family run, as are many Finger Lakes wineries. And joining us, a return guest with more to talk about because it's a big celebration this year, is Meaghan Frank, who is a family member. I think she's 4th generation, and we're so excited to have her as we lead up to Thanksgiving, to have a wonderful New York State winery on our show. So Meaghan Frank, welcome to the Connected Table Live.
Oh, thanks so much, Melanie and David. What a pleasure it is to be with you and to be with everyone on the Connected Table. It's an honor. So thank you.
Well, we're happy to have you back, Meaghan. It's been a few years since we've seen you in person, but you have a lot of great things going on right now with the winery, and we thought it was a great time to have you back.
Yeah.
So here we are.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we started with location. I think it's really important. Just so you know, we have a lot of global listeners and viewers as well. So let's talk about what is important about the location of the Finger Lakes and how many lakes there are and where Dr. Konstantin Frank is in the Finger Lake wine region and why it's such an important AVA.
Absolutely. Yeah, the Finger Lakes, my husband always jokes with me because anytime we travel to Europe or, outside of America, everyone asks, oh, where are you from? And I always say the Finger Lakes. I don't say Western New York. I don't say upstate New York. I'm trying to draw as much attention to the name Finger Lakes. And he's always like, no one knows where that is. I was like, well, now they will. So the Finger Lakes were this collection of 11 lakes in Western New York. We're about 5 hours or so from New York City. So we're not terribly close to any major city. We're pretty isolated out here. But these 11 lakes were carved out during the last ice age. Glaciers receded about 10,000 years ago, and they carved out these very deep lakes, and also pulled, when the glaciers receded, they pulled a myriad of different soil types around the lakes. So that's making up really interesting soil types, especially for our aromatic varieties, which are really beautifully done here in the Finger Lakes. So there's about 4 lakes that are home to the majority of the wine production. So Seneca Lake probably has the most wineries. I think there's over 100 wineries now on Seneca Lake, which is also the deepest of the Finger Lakes. So at its deepest point, it's over 600 feet deep. So really helping trap that heat, acts as a moderating sort of effect. We get very cold winters here in the Finger Lakes. If anyone's been to our area, it's sort of our
I have.
Achilles heel. Yeah, our Achilles heel. We don't have wildfires, thankfully, but we do have very cold winters on occasion. So these deep lakes really trap that heat and help moderate the area nearby the lake, helping us to survive these cold winters. So Seneca Lake, that middle Finger Lake, we also have vineyards there. There's Cayuga Lake on one side, which, is home to many vineyards. You also have Cornell University there. You have Ithaca. So that's a nice global draw. And then on the other side of Seneca, we have Keuka Lake, and that's where we're located. So we're on the west side of Keuka Lake. It's a fork-shaped lake, so it's a very unique look. And so where you are, Melanie and David, you can see the bluff point behind there from your photo. And that's sort of that middle point where the two forks connect. So Keuka is around 200 feet deep, so still having that moderating effect at very deep slopes, high content of shale. So a lot of people in the Finger Lakes are talking about their soil types because of this glacial till that was left behind sort of during those glaciers receding. So really, really interesting.
David took that photo.
I did.
When we visited, it was harvest was underway or just underway, and it was just a beautiful time. And I gotta tell you, I try to live with no regrets, but if I have one regret, is that we didn't visit the Finger Lakes more frequently when we lived in New York City. So many people who live in New York City never go anywhere other than the Hamptons or the Hudson Valley or Pennsylvania or Jersey Shore or whatever. But this is a stunning area for recreation, a lot of boating, a lot of hiking. I think it's a last count I picked up on the one, 150 wineries, most family owned. Also craft breweries and distilleries, restaurants, small, everything, and just unbelievably beautiful.
Rolling countryside.
Yeah.
Just
You're
gorgeous.
talking about a world away from Manhattan and a great vacation spot. Everybody needs to go.
Absolutely. Completely agree. Yeah, very outdoorsy. Everything's centered around the lakes, boating, fishing, even in the summer, or in the winter, ice fishing, sailing. There's there's something for everyone, truly.
We drove up, but I think Ithaca is the closest airport, right?
Mm-hmm. Or Rochester.
Mm-hmm. Or Rochester.
Or Rochester.
Keuka, without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's, it takes the best places take time to get to.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned how cold it gets in the wintertime. Yeah. And I think that's a great place to kind of bring people who haven't heard the story up to date on how Konstantin Frank helped create the vinifera movement in New York, because he had been growing vinifera grapes in Europe in a cold environment as well. But in New York, nobody thought it could be done. So he's the one that actually changed people's minds and thinking. So why don't you tell us quickly that story before we go to start talking about why we're here today?
Sure, David. Yeah, it's a great story. And it is a great connection with those cold winters. That is something Konstantin was used to. So he was born in Odessa, Ukraine, and spent, most of his life there. At an early age, became interested in grape growing and winemaking. Actually made his first wine by the age of 15. So set himself on a path to earn a PhD in viticulture from the Polytechnic University of Odessa. And he was working with a multitude of different vinifera varieties. So vinifera meaning the European species of grape, Riesling, Cabernet Sauvignon, tons of different Eastern European varieties, some of which we grow here, like our Cazzacatelli and Separavi. Quite a few that we don't, have here, but he worked with a multitude of different varieties, and he was really a researcher and a scientist. So it was World War II that brought the family to America. It was Konstantin, his wife, Eugenia, and 3 children, and they came through New York City, settled in a very small 1-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, very much that American dream story. And basically had to start over. So Konstantin was washing dishes, in New York, trying to learn English. He spoke 6 languages, but not a word of English. So, this researcher and professor who spoke all these languages, he was very, very enthusiastic about growing grapes. He needed to find that location where they were growing grapes, planting vines, and that was the Finger Lakes. So he made a trip up here. And what perplexed Konstantin was that there was no vinifera here. There were no European grapes here in this area. Booming wine industry. But what was grown were Concord, Catawba, Niagara, the Vitis labrusca, so the American varieties. French-American hybrids were becoming popular as well, as this was the early 1950s. But he was really, really not understanding where was the Riesling, where was the Chardonnay, where was the Pinot Noir. And researchers told him it's too cold. And that, to your point, David, this totally connects the story. He was like, I come from a very cold place and I know how to, plant vinifera in cold places. This is not due to the cold. And he had a theory that it was actually due to a tiny little bug with a very long name called phylloxera. So phylloxera being from North America, it's sort of our gift to world viticulture, if you will.
Backhanded gift it is.
Gift, yeah. Made its way over to Europe with the advent of the steamship in the mid-1800s.
Right.
Devastated vineyards throughout Europe. So Konstantin, ironically, had dealt with this North American pest in Europe. And it was a group of European scientists that came up with this method, completely natural method, whereby you graft American rootstock with European vine, and that avoids the pest. The phylloxera root louse it's not interested in eating the American rootstock. So that was widely planted where he was, or widely practiced where he was in Odessa. And he essentially brought that technique here to the eastern United States. So he became the first person to successfully plant the European varieties east of the Mississippi. And that's what we continue today. So we work with about 17 different European varieties today. We have about 140 acres of vineyards, and we continue Konstantin's legacy, which is really exciting.
It's so interesting because that grafting saved the European wine industry also. I mean, it was a phenomenal turning point in global wine production. Really significant. And in the United States, it really kind of opened up the East Coast slowly to wine production. I know in Virginia, they had a lot of trial and error to get it right because of the humidity, same in Pennsylvania. But, New York has thrived as a wine region. We've been to Buffalo, we've been to Long Island, we've been to the Hudson Valley, and of course, the Finger Lakes. And it's been very successful there. And, the lake effect is also critically important to all of us, whether you're in the Niagara wine region or Finger Lakes, because of that moderating effect.
Absolutely. No, it's you can really tell, it's the same locations that are beautiful for having kind of second homes or resorts are the best places to have vineyards, because you're going to have that moderating effect with that lake view. So it's not really an issue in the current day of developers fighting, people who want to develop vineyards, but I do anticipate that becoming a bit of a friction point in the future.
Interesting. Well, those developers. So, the winery, so he purchased, I think he purchases his vineyards in 1958, came over 51, purchased, he worked for Cornell for a while, and then the winery was established in 1962. Back then, how many wineries were there?
Yeah, there were about 15, and they were all around Keuka Lake. So very large wineries. Almost none of them are in existence today. So just very large kind of sweeter, kind of grapey and flavor wines were being produced. But we do have that strong history, that strong backbone. Unfortunately, Prohibition was very damaging, to so many American wineries, but particularly Keuka Lake wineries. So there were plenty of others prior to Prohibition, and then that really dwindled during that time. But so Konstantin was kind of fighting against the grain. There was already an established industry, and he was sort of seen as rocking a boat that didn't need to be rocked. Like, people were making plenty of money. They were selling their wine. And, he was fighting against it. He would say, you Americans deserve only excellent. And we need to be making the most excellent wine for customers, for guests. And he believed it to his core, that was something that was really important. So after a short stint of working at another winery that's no longer in business called Gold Seal Vineyards, he basically started his own experimental winery. He had over 66 different vinifera varieties on the property, some of which obviously we've kept, like Riesling and Gewürztraminer and Pinot Gris, and others that we no longer have, like Mitzvani and Ferment and Pedro Jimenez, like so many really interesting grapes that, he was just trying to test the waters. He was looking at what worked and what didn't. And he was very giving with his knowledge. Like you mentioned, wineries in Pennsylvania and Virginia and New Jersey. He would have viticulturalists, vineyard managers, winemakers come from all of these states, particularly in the Northeast. And they would come, they would get cuttings from his nursery. They would learn the grafting technique, and then they would go back to their home state and plant a vineyard. So really igniting this quality revolution, particularly in East Coast winemaking, is very much a legacy that Konstantin helped ignite.
Melanie, when we owned Rivendell back in the day, we actually bought Chardonnay grapes from the Gold Seal Vineyard, which was planted by Konstantin Frank.
Yeah.
And that was I believe, I don't know if they still have the original vines in the vineyard, but it was the oldest Chardonnay plantings in New York State.
Amazing.
Very cool. We got some of that fruit for one of our cuvées of Chardonnay that we did.
I love the connection. That's wonderful.
That's great. It's a fabulous vineyard.
So another milestone of many is that Dr. Konstantin Frank really kind of put forth the first method traditional sparkling wines using the traditional 3 champagne grapes. And you're celebrating a 40th anniversary this year. That was 1985. And now you're launching your 40th cuvée vintage, right?
That's right. Yeah. And it's interesting. It was Konstantin's son, Willie, that started the sparkling program. He started a full sparkling winery right next door to our main winery. And Konstantin famously, he enjoyed sparkling wine, but he wasn't really passionate about producing it. He actually was quoted as saying, the only reason the French make champagne is because they can't make a decent table wine that far north. So it's like, oh my gosh, how could he have said that? I'm a personal huge fan of champagne, but his son, Willie, felt very differently about champagne and sparkling wine in the traditional method, and basically built on his father's success of planting vinifera successfully, utilizing Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Pinot Meunier. He basically started that operation in the late 70s and had his first vintage in 1985. And to your point, Melanie, we are celebrating our 40th anniversary this year. It's been really fun to produce an anniversary edition wine, it's been a really fun project to work on. And our sparkling winemaker, Eric Bauman, he's in his 20th work anniversary with us. So he's worked with the family for a long time on these sparkling wines, and they are truly something special. So I'm not sure if you guys had a chance to try this Cuvée 85, but we
have our empty bottle right here. I sent Juan a photo, but I don't know if we can get up on the screen. But tell us about it, because it's very special and it's limited edition. And there's still, I went online. There it is. I went online and it's still available if you go to the Dr. Konstantin Frank website, because there's only 100 cases made.
That's right. Yeah. So we our sparkling program is pretty robust. We produce between 7 to 10 different bottlings in a typical year, but our kind of cornerstone of the portfolio is our Brut, which is a blend of 55% Chardonnay, 40% Pinot Noir, 5% Pinot Meunier. And for this special anniversary bottling, we basically did the dosage, which is the little bit of reserve wine added at the end after the yeast is removed, after the wine's been riddled, after the wine's been disgorged. The dosage stage is a really important time to add a little bit of reserve wine. And so we did our first vintage, 1985. The reserve wine is from that year. So you have a current 2021 Brut, like those grapes were harvested in 2021, disgorged in, 2024 or so. And then we use the dosage, the reserve wine from 1985. So it's a very unique sort of culmination of all the years. You have primary notes like, lots of green apple, lemon freshness from that current release. But then you have these tertiary notes like honeycomb and stewed stone fruits and things like that from that 1985 dosage portion. So I just am really thrilled about it. We use pretty much all of the 1985 original vintage. So it sort of lives on in this bottling, if you will, which I think is really special.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
so
it's really fun.
I remember when you first came, when Willie, who I remember meeting a number of times at tastings around when we were in the trenches together, and a lovely guy. It was originally called Chateau Frank, which was how he differentiated it from Dr. Konstantin Frank wines. But I think you've removed that now from the sparkling wine program name, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's a great point, David. Yeah, it used to be called Chateau Frank. And that was really a sense of pride, I think, for my grandfather. He wanted to have his own kind of twist on this program. But what we were finding is just so many people did not connect the two, which is very understandable. The labels were completely different. They're in different sections of the store. And for us, these wines tend to get really great accolades, great scores. They help build sort of the brand identity in the portfolio. That we think of them as like the jewel of the portfolio, if you will. So connecting them makes a lot of sense because it is still the same family. That's managing both programs. So we did a few years ago switch to the Dr. Konstantin Frank label, which has really helped sort of connect the two. But that's a great point.
Well, it's also a good branding point because there's a Frank family vineyards in Calistoga. Right. So it's really important to differentiate. They're completely different families and wines and regions.
Absolutely.
So also important. I'm curious. We visited the riddling room, and do you still hand riddle or do you machine riddle?
We have both. Yeah. So we do we have some hand riddling racks for kind of smaller volume wines and also dosage wines. But we have 4-jar palettes in sort of our back production area, which has been really helpful. And it's really helped us keep up with demand. And there's really no quality difference, between the two. One is just maybe a little bit more romantic, the hand riddling.
A lot less carpal tunnel syndrome with the
One of the reasons I asked, and I have not read the article, but Shayna Clark, who's a terrific wine writer, did an article on the disappearing in Champagne. There are very few hand riddlers left. And I've been going, I think I don't know who she wrote it for. I think it's one of the wine magazines, but I'm looking forward to reading that. But because it sounds like it's like shoe cobblers, the disappearing breed. And it's really special when you know that you still have people who are doing that. Very laborious, time consuming tradition. It's really, really nice. You make a variety of sparkling wines using traditional the 3 main champagne grapes, and of course a Blanc de Blanc and a Rosé, Blanc de Noir. You also make a sparkling Riesling, and Riesling is I think you said you'd have over, I forgot how many, 40. You have many, many grapes you work with. Riesling is the star variety in the Finger Lakes area. Tell us about that wine. You have a Riesling Natur and probably a Riesling Brut. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Riesling, I mean, it's a very natural progression. The Finger Lakes, that's the grape that we can compete on a world stage. Like by far, that is our strongest sort of wine and grape that we can lead with. And for us, it makes up over 60% of our production. So it's huge for us. We make a multitude of different styles. As you pointed out, the sparkling Rieslings, we have 2 different ones. We have a 0 dosage sparkling Riesling Natur. And then we have our Celeb, which is our most popular bottling. It has a touch higher dosage, touch of sweetness, but again, a really bright acidity. And those are the Celeb in particular is meant to be kind of consumed, quickly. It's like a very fresh, fruit forward style. So not a ton of time aging on the lees, just making sure that wine is still very fresh. It is still produced in the traditional method, but just not looking for that sort of extended time to keep those really fresh aromas and flavors. Mm-hmm.
That's interesting.
So that bottle of Célèbre from Chateau Franc that I have in the refrigerator, we should probably drink.
Yeah, we should.
Oh,
We
you
need
can,
to.
but honestly, it develops beautifully. Like Riesling, as you know, ages so well, and so you're just going to pick up some really interesting tertiary notes as it ages. But yeah, it really depends what you like, David and Melanie.
Well,
like whatever
I was digging through trying to find some bottles of Franc wines today to kind of display with us on the show, and I couldn't find any, but I found two. I found a bottle of Célèbre, and then I also found a 2010 Brut Rosé.
Nice. Well, it sounds like we got to hook you up because
I
it
know.
sounds like
We need to hook up.
We're low. We're low.
You ship nationwide for all the folks who aren't going to make it to New York. Is there?
That's correct.
We're low. We're low.
That is correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't ship to a handful of states, but most states we do ship to.
Well, those states don't know what they're missing. Honestly, that's what I have to say. I mean, for anyone who's still planning, their holidays and they want an American wine, this is a fun way to have a great and special experience from New York State. And I think it's important because I think a lot of people, particularly people who are not familiar with wine production and the AVAs, there's an AVA in every state in the United States. They don't understand how amazing New York State wines are. And we're not paid to say that. We are true believers in this. And what I was taken with when we finally got to go, because we've been to many New York wine tastings, over the years, when we finally visited Dr. Konstantin Frank, it was such an extraordinary experience. It was in 2020, so we were all masked and everything, but there was a whole beautiful tasting room dedicated to the history of winemaking and Dr. Konstantin Frank's impact. And you actually, at the time when we were there, you had a whole history on the women in your family who were very much involved in developing the winery. Is that still up, or was that a special exhibit?
No, that is. Yeah. And we actually produce, we have a series of 4 wines called our Helm series that HELM is, sort of at the helm. Behind every great man, there stands a great woman is sort of the whole idea. And we have one Hilda, Eugenia, Lena, and Margaret. So my 2 great aunts, my grandmother and my great grandmother. And so 2 single vineyard Rieslings, a single vineyard Chardonnay, and a red blend makes up that series. So they're really great, tangible ways to tell their story, to, pay tribute to their impact, and also highlight some of our best vineyard sites and our best barrels. So that's been a really fun project that we're looking forward to continuing and building upon. So really fun.
So we know that this year, 2025, has been focused on the big 40th anniversary cuvee, and there was a big party, which we obviously missed because we were here and not there. But what are y'all working on? What are y'all, the family, my Southern, what is the family working on for the future? Where do you want to go with Dr. Konstantin Frank and help, obviously elevate the awareness of Finger Lakes in New York State as well?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's always top of mind. We think of ourselves as sort of stewards, right, of this business, and making sure we're developing it, sort of increasing the credibility, the loyalty, the positivity, and passing it on to the next generation has always kind of been the motto. So, we're really excited about the 2025 harvest that we just completed, where we're able to fill our tanks and barrels. And it was a very solid year for quality and quantity, which we don't always get in the Finger Lakes.
True.
And a lot of concentration there. So we had a bit of drought-like conditions, in August. So smaller berry sizes, a little bit more intensity and concentration. So we're really, really excited. We still have lots of different ferments going, and our winemaking team is working hard with some blending options and things like that, but it's going to be a really good year. So, for us, we're looking to expand our vineyard acreage. We have vineyards on the west side of Keuka Lake and also the east side of Seneca Lake. We're looking at also some unique varieties to plant, continuing that work from Konstantin of, what is going to make the most sense. We've become very much pioneers with Gruner Veltliner and Blaufränkisch and sort of varieties that Konstantin hadn't planted originally. Cabernet Franc is another one we're really excited about. We just, there's a lot of things to be excited about. But I would say just the slow growth model, that's what we've kind of always done, is slowly, incrementally growing, putting all of the profits back into the business year after year, developing, more hospitality experiences. As you mentioned, Melanie, we have a variety of things to do when folks visit us, but one that we're really proud of is our 1886 food and wine experience, which we just closed out on our 10th year of. It's been voted 4 times the last 4 years as the top wine tour in America by USA Today. So that's been really great national recognition for a very educational, very creative sort of tasting experience that is kind of hard to find elsewhere. So we're looking forward to, hopefully we can get a streak going, do a 5th year next year. But lots of exciting things in the future, but kind of continuing on that momentum.
Describe the experience for people who are curious about doing it, because we're really trying to put a big emphasis now on wine travel and getting people out to go and experience. What is the experience?
Sure. Yeah, so it was inspired by my time. I did my graduate degree in Australia, in Adelaide, and there you have 4 wine regions that you can get to within an hour to 2 hours. Like there was just, for me, it was a great education in wine tourism and wine hospitality, and doing all of these more sort of food and wine pairing experiences, having a winemaker take you through the cellar. So, coming back, it was really important to think of something where we could get people behind the scenes. And that's what we did. It's gone through a few iterations over the years, but it's remained pretty much the same kind of format. We start with a tour. So it could be a tour of the sparkling cellar, the vineyard, or the winery, sort of the barrel cellar and the winery. It depends on the day you book. So guests can come. We have some folks that come multiple times through a vacation just to make sure they hit all the tours. And then after the tour portion, you taste a few wines, through the tour. You get a lot of history, very much a behind the scenes look at how the wines are made and how the grapes are grown. And then you come back into a beautiful space, and the why we call it 1886, which I do think was probably a mistake because it's really hard to remember the number. So all the time I get people, I did your 1823 tasting or your 1845. And I'm like, yeah, I know which one you're talking about. We only have one that starts with 18. But the building dates back to 1886. It was one of New York's first wineries way back before our family arrived in this country. But it was called the Western New York Wine Company. And the building is built with all local field stones. So it's just got this beautiful, very European kind of feel. So you head back into that space. You have a seated flight of wines paired with different foods from a local chef. And the foods, the wines, and the art change monthly. So it's also mirroring what's going on in the vineyard. So our first kind of month, we think of bud burst. So it's like this feeling of excitement. There's a lot of green. There's, things. So the plate is really going to match with what's going on in the vineyard, going into flowering, into veraison, all the colors, like the feelings, things like that. So it's a really great creative outlet for our team to get into. And we run those experiences May through October. We have 2 seatings a day, 11 and 2:30. So Thursday through Sunday. I know that was a lot of details, but please check out our website if you'd like to do that experience, because it's very special.
I'm curious. I'm sure you get lots of visitors in the summer and the fall, but what happens in the winter? Do you still get visitors, or are you open for visits year round if somebody wants to go?
We are open for visits year round. We just close for a handful of holidays, but we are open year round. And the winter, honestly, is the best time to come. You're probably in an empty tasting room. You're going to get tons of attention. And that's, from us, but also other local wineries. Plenty of them are open year round. So it's my personal favorite season because it's quiet. You can see all the way down to the lake, like from where you two are sitting, that view behind you. It is gorgeous in the winter because you have the backdrop of the snow. The lake is so beautiful. There's lots of skiing. There's ice fishing, as I mentioned. We just get less people because it's a little more challenging, I think, to drive in the snow. But if you can brave that, it's a great, awesome time to visit the Finger Lakes.
It's such a beautiful place any time of year.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
it
thinking
really
because
is.
if you're into cross-country
Absolutely.
skiing and that is probably like great.
Oh, and we had tons of trails for cross
Yeah, I
country.
bet.
Yeah.
Have you noticed, I hate to bring up climate change, but it is getting somewhat warmer in places around the world. Are you seeing that in the Finger Lakes? Because it's a very cold region in the wintertime historically. And you get a lot of lake effects weather that comes off of the Great Lakes down to the Finger Lakes at times as well. So you do get snow cover. Are you seeing longer growing seasons though? Or are you seeing shorter growing seasons? What's changing for you up in the Finger Lakes?
Yeah, it's a great question. We basically are seeing more extreme weather events. So it's not really a trend of like warming at a constant amount. Unfortunately, we sort of wish it was that way, but it seems like it's difficult to just sort of predict what is going to happen. Like, to give you an example, in 2022, we had a very cold winter, reduced the bud count, so we had a small harvest. And then in 2023, for the first time ever in 65 years, we had a spring frost. So we didn't have anything on record prior to us, the 65 years, but it's just not a common thing in the Finger Lakes to have a spring frost because of the moderating influence of the lakes. We just saw this intense warming happening in early May, which was very not typical. And then the buds began to emerge on some of those early budding varieties. For example, Chardonnay was a big one. And it was disastrous for a lot of producers. So we are investing in wind machines. So that's something we're going to have 3 wind machines, hopefully this year, put in. So we're trying to mitigate things where we can. The other thing that's kind of interesting in the Finger Lakes is most vineyards are dry farmed. So we don't regularly use irrigation. We personally don't have any irrigation that's really used in our vineyards. There are a handful that do use them, but it's not typically necessary. But we are seeing more vintages where you're having drought stress. So that's another challenge that we foresee maybe needing some investment in. But it's, we're having flooding, hail, spring frost. It's like, what is going on here?
Just the volatility that you weren't expecting.
We're seeing that all over. We go to Europe a lot, and there's been just so much volatility over there and a lot of spring frost. I mean, it's a challenge. And you have to, invest in equipment and make adjustments. You referenced that you're experimenting with different varieties. Do you think in the Finger Lakes there will be certain varieties that will be better acclimated to addressing these long-term climatic changes? Because I don't think it's going to be reversed. I think it's going to keep just going that way.
Yeah, it's a great point. I definitely think, Riesling is one of our hardiest varieties that can withstand quite a bit. So I think continuing with Riesling, we've, sort of unified as a state with Cabernet Franc. That's become sort of the red grape of New York State. And we're part of this movement called Cab Franc Forward that's doing lots of events in New York and in other places. So that's definitely something to watch. But Riesling, Cabernet Franc, also Separavi. That's a grape that's really growing in popularity. It's a Georgian variety. Konstantin pioneered it to America. It was widely planted, still is today in Ukraine. And that grape is really interesting because it holds its acidity and yet it has that colored juice. So it's a Tenturi variety.
Yeah.
So even in these very, very difficult vintages, you're able to make a very bold, deeply hued red, which is not guaranteed in any other vintage for any other grape. So I think it's looking at these cold, hardy, resilient, varieties. I think that's going to be the key to our success.
It makes sense. I know when we were in the Niagara wine region, we had some very good Saperavi as well. It just seems like those Georgian varietals, those hardier varietals from the northernmost regions of Eastern and Western Europe would be a good fit here. For people who are familiar with Rieslings from France, for example, in Europe, how would you, if they are not familiar with the Rieslings from New York State and specifically the Finger Lakes, how would you describe and define and differentiate based
Mhm.
on the terroir?
Great point. Yeah, I would say, we're probably looking more like Germanic, Austrian kind of,
Mhm.
depending on if you're really trying to generalize.
Right.
You don't typically have like the power and the oomph that a lot of the Alsatian Rieslings get, as it's just so sunny there. We just don't have those those same sunshine hours, but definitely you have a full gamut within the Finger Lakes, depending on where you are, if you're on Keuka Lake or Seneca Lake or Cayuga, also depending on the winemaker's style.
Mhm.
But just generally, I would say Mosel, like very, very similar, that floral note, that very fresh, that fruity tone that you get in a lot of Mosel Rieslings would be probably quite similar. Also Rheingau, Pfalz for some more powerful expressions, which we definitely have here as well in the Finger Lakes. And then, a lot of Austrian Rieslings as well could go in that same vein, especially with our very rocky soils here. So there's lots of connections and things you can find. The other similarity, I would say, particularly with Germany, is, like for us, we'll produce in a typical year 7 to 9 different Rieslings. You have producers producing 15 to 20 different Rieslings. And that you see, commonly in parts of Germany and other areas. So just embracing the versatility of Riesling is something that's really exciting in the Finger Lakes, and celebrating that diversity. So I would say that's another really big, interesting connection between us and other parts of Europe.
When we were living in New York, we went to a lot of Riesling tastings. But I think it'd be, I like instead of walk-arounds, I'd love to do a side-by-side, even blind tasting of the New York State Rieslings by AVA with German, Austrian, France. I think that would be such a great palate exercise.
I love it.
Thank you.
That's very valuable. I'll come.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
I just think for me, that's the way I like to learn about wine versus those big giant tastings, to sit down and thoughtfully do it. And when you taste blind, you have no preconceived notion, and it can be really it's kind of like Judgment of Paris, with Riesling. But I think that would be so interesting.
Yes.
I'd love to do that.
We'll call it the Judgment of Hammondsport.
Hammondsport being where you're located, the town.
Absolutely.
And Hammondsport is beautiful. There's a charming town.
It is
To visit as well.
Well, just that whole area is beautiful.
It really is.
I love it up there.
Gorgeous.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. Well, that's kind of interesting. I do have another question. Do you still have any family in the Ukraine, or is everybody gone?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we have basically it's the equivalent of Konstantin's sister's sort of great-grandchildren are still there. And my great aunt Lena was she went back and forth many times throughout her life to Odessa, kept in touch with the family. She's recently passed away, but her daughter sort of continued. She was been passed the baton. She's our kind of family historian, the family connector. And so we do have relatives there that we keep in touch with, who we've been in regular contact with. The kind of equivalent in the generational line, her name is Irina. She's a pediatric cardiologist, and she's still working there. She's working in Odessa, and she has a son there. So we are, keeping our family in our thoughts and prayers, and it's a very challenging time, as you know, in Ukraine, and we're praying for a positive end to the war. And we also do quite a bit with some local organizations that benefit Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, the relief effort. So there's a great organization called Rock Meaghan, who we've worked closely with, doing Ukrainian benefit for, and also a flight in our garden, our wine garden, that the proceeds are going towards relief efforts. So we're trying to do what we can, and that connection is so important to us, to keep that connection strong in this difficult time.
Well, we're all hoping that everything will move forward in a positive way. But I had a feeling, I remember reading about some of the efforts you're doing, and it's so important to hold on to that connection, and hopefully your family will be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you.
You're very welcome. Gosh, we've enjoyed talking with you. We got to dig out those wines that we still have.
We do.
We're staying in New Orleans for the holidays now, and I think it's time to have some little special dinners and wines and make every day a day to be thankful, right?
Absolutely. That sounds great. Yeah, especially coming to Thanksgiving. It's a great time to open some American wines, open wines from the Finger Lakes, and
always American wines on Thanksgiving.
Yeah, I love I'm a big believer. I mean, the American wine industry, it has its challenges, but this is a great reason to go out and support it and drink American for the holidays.
Absolutely.
Well, Meaghan, it's always great to see you. Hopefully we'll see you and raise a glass together with you. If you're not coming to New Orleans, hopefully we'll be up in New York. We miss New York. We love New York. It's always a state of mind and in our hearts wherever we go. So wonderful. Thank you for joining us and sharing your story. And we love the special cuvee. It's really special. And as I said, it's available. www.drfrankwines.com. And it's, as I saw, it's still available because you do have some sold out wines, but this one is available. And with 100 cases, go and get it now. Great gift.
Thank you so much, Melanie and David, and happy Thanksgiving, happy holidays to you both. And thank you for having me, and would love to see you back in the Finger Lakes anytime.
I hope so. So
it was our pleasure to see you again, and we look forward to coming and visiting. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So you've been listening and watching the Connected Table Live TV and our audio podcast, which can be heard on over 65 podcast channels, including all the big ones like Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, you name it. You can see this episode on the Connected Table Live TV on YouTube. Please share it and recommend it. We want to have more people join us at our table because we love sharing our experiences and the people we like to connect with you every day in every way. And until then, stay insatiably curious. Thank you.